Hello students, today I have chosen the topic the biological clock. The biological clock, the topic has been taken from the graduation first year, but the concept of biological clock is equally relevant and helpful to the postgraduate students as well. So today we will be discussing about the concept of biological clock, its structure, its function, and its relevant. Why biological clock is important for the living organisms. I am Dr. Dipak Kumar, assistant professor in zoology at KKM College, Jamui, in the Mungan University. So let's start the concept of biological clock. So, to understand the concept of biological clock, we should know some of the terms related to the topic. And these terms are biological rhythms, biological clock, circadian rhythm, Zeitgeber, and lastly, we will discuss the circadian axis. So, the biology of periodism, the biology of cyclical phenomenon, comes under the branch of biology known as chronobiology. Here, chrono means time, and biology we know the study of life. So, the ability of life, the ability of living organism to keep time is studied under the branch of biology known as chronobiology. Living organisms are capable of keeping time. They are capable of following the periodic or cyclical events that happens in the nature in the surrounding. So the ability of living organism to keep time and act according to the cyclical changes in the environment is studied under the branch of biology known as chronobiology. The, so the why chronobiology? What happens? The living organisms, they basically act to the environmental cues like solar cycles, like sunrise, sunset, and lunar cycles as well. The variations that happens in the environment is recorded or being accepted by the living organisms, and different biological phenomena acts or happens according to the change in the environment. So where does these biological clocks are found? The biological clocks are found in animals and in the activity they perform like eating, sleeping, mating, hibernating, and so on. As well as it is also found in the plants in the activities like leaf movement, photosynthetic reactions. And not only the animals in plant but also in the lower organisms or the microorganisms which are fungi and protozoa. So there are different cyclical phenomena that may happens over the year, over this season, like 3 month or 4 month, over a month, or a week. So depending upon this the duration, the different terms are used. Out of these cyclical phenomena, the circadian rhythm, which happens in every about 24 hours, is known as circadian rhythm. So we will be discussing about the circadian rhythm in detail in following slides. So we we wanted to conceptualize the idea of biological clock. So what a biological clock? Before that, we will be understanding the biological rhythm. So basically biological clock is internal structure, and biological rhythm is the action is the output in organism is giving towards the change in environment. It is basically a biological event or function that occurs in time in a repeated order with a repeated interval between occurrence. It means that a fixed interval is there, and after that fixed interval the phenomenon repeats itself. That's what it is. That's why it is cyclical. And the it has been found that the organisms primarily respond to the phenomenon of light and darkness, that is sunset, sunrise, and the night. So biological rhythms allow an organism to harmonize successfully with its environment. So, when the cyclical changes are there in the environment, so the organism has to go with the cyclical changes so that it can increase its survivability. So the biological rhythms can be divided into two types, according to the ability of organisms. Like it is exogenous biological rhythm or endogenous biological rhythm. Exogenous biological rhythm, what happens there? As we are discussing that there are environmental cues, some environmental cyclical changes are there, and those stimulus is being accepted, being catch by the organisms, and organism acts according to the cyclical changes. So in exogenous biological rhythms, whenever the external cues is removed, the cyclical changes or cyclical response by the organism is also vanished. When the external cues is removed or anyhow it get vanished, this organism's response is also get vanished. For example, the hopping of sparrow on a perch when light is turned on. When in the dawn, in the morning, when light is there, these sparrows start hopping. So when if there is no light, then this sparrow will not hop. On the other hand, for the endogenous biological rhythms, these internal biological clocks are maintained by the organisms even when there is no external cues, like the wake and sleep cycle in human, as well as the daily body temperature that changes cyclically during the course of time, for example for the 24 hours. So even if the external cues like light period or uh, the day and night period is removed, these cyclical changes will happen in human body. So these are the endogenous biological rhythms. So there are, as we were talking, that there are different types of biological rhythms. Out of that, circadian rhythm is most important. So what are the circadian rhythms? Circadian rhythm is the rhythm which happens in around 24 hours. It is not exactly 24 hours, it's around 24 hours. For example, our sleep and awakening conditions during the period of 24 hours, we sleep at night and keep awake ourselves during the day. And it's found in most living things, including animals, plant, and many tiny microbes. Like not other rhythms, cyclical rhythms like seasonal or by the period of a year. The circadian rhythms are very much ubiquitous. It happens in almost all organisms. So there are other terms. If the cyclical if the repetition of the phenomenon is less than 20 hours, then it is called ultraradian. And if it is more than 28 hours, then it is called infraradian. And if it fluctuates between 20 to 28 hours, then it is called as circadian. Okay, so there are different rhythms like seasonals. Tidal rhythms are there, which is mostly found in marine animals, and they roughly act to the tidal change in tidal motions, which is almost 12 hours. There are some other changes which happens in very less time, like gene oscillations. So there are different examples of cyclical events that we can see here in this next slide, like circannual rhythm, which happens in once in a year, that is called a circannual rhythm. Neural rhythm, like neural fires are there, some informations are generated there, which is less than 1 second. Cardiac rhythm, we know that the heart beats that happens around in 1 second, that is cardiac rhythm. Calcium oscillations inside cell, the calcium fluxes are there, that happens in around in between, it takes time between seconds to minutes. And some biochemical oscillations are there which can take time like from 30 seconds to 20 minutes. Then we know the cell division, mitotic cell division, the mitotic cell division that can happen from 20 minutes to in 24 hours. Then hormonal rhythms are there that can occur in minutes to hours. And circadian rhythm we have discussed. Ovarian cycle we can take, which is in around 1 month in 28 days. So there are different cyclical phenomena that can happen in different duration of time. This repeats after that duration is there. So now we once we know that biological rhythms are there, then who keeps these rhythms? These rhythms are kept by the biological clock. What is biological clock basically? The biological clock is organism's innate timing device. It is a device which keeps time in an organism. It is internal physiological system that tracks the environmental rhythms, that accepts that receives the signal from the external environment and keeps the time, and it is responsible for generating biological rhythm. That's what we are discussing. The biological clock is responsible for keeping the biological rhythm. Biological clock is the organism's structure, its organism's ability to know the time, and according to the change in the environment, this timekeeper changes the physiological and behavioral changes in the organisms. These biological clocks are composed of specific molecules. They are mostly proteins, and these proteins interact inside cell or in the organism's body. Biological clock are found in nearly every tissue and organ. Not only they are a super clock, the master clock, and there are the peripheral clocks. We will be studying in uh, 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 next slides. So these biological clocks are found in every tissue and organ. So there are some characteristics, there are some features by which a biological clock can be described. What are these features? There are mainly four features by which we can describe a biological clock. First one is the clock is endogenous, means it is inside an organism. Okay, so it is inside an organism and it is innate ability, the ability by birth. The ability by birth is called innate ability that maintains the period of a particular length between biological functions, like we eat at equal intervals. We know that biological, like digestive system, they expect that we should be eating about by a particular time. So according to that expectation, the digestive system prepares itself. That's why we feel hunger at a fixed interval during a day, and that's why these clocks are endogenous and they keep time, and they make the hormonal, behavioral, and the physiological changes inside the body. Okay, so second a property of biological clock is the its temperature independency. It doesn't depend on temperature. The temperature outside the body, the environmental temperature may vary, but that temperature doesn't affect this biological clock. The biological clock is only affected by the cyclical cues, cyclical changes inside in the environment. Third one, it is the ability to reset in order to maintain a relationship with the environmental cues. Like if somehow the cyclical phenomenon, the environment, the environmental cues changes itself, then the organism can reset its biological clock according to new change in the environment. For example, we are here in India and we follow the uh, day night cycle here. But if we go like for if we travel to Europe or we go to USA, there the cyclical phenomena is different. When here we are witnessing the day, in USA we will be witnessing night at the same time. So when this cyclical phenomena is get shifted, now new cyclical phenomenon is there, then this biological clock has the ability to reset itself according to the changes in the environment, according to new cyclical phenomena that it receives from the environment. So it is the very important characteristics of a biological clock. The last one is the ability to keep the time, it to calculate the time, that how much time has passed. It is 1 hour, 2 hour, 4 hour, 20 hours, 24 hours. So how body knows that how much time has been passed? This ability is there in the biological clock. Okay, so biological clock can keep time, biological clock can reset itself, and biological clock can uh, maintain the cyclical phenomenon inside the organisms. Okay, so here in this diagram we are just trying to uh, know the structures in human system. What are the different structure which makes a biological clock function? We know we have eyes where we can receive the light from the environment. It is photo optic structure, optic organ, which receives light from the environment, environmental cues in the form of light. Then there are suprachiasmatic nucleus here present at the uh, chiasma, the optic chiasma. Over the optic chiasma, this suprachiasmatic nucleus keeps the time. It calculates the time, how much time has passed. Then this suprachiasmatic nucleus receive uh, further relays the signals into the brain, and then brain acts according to the signal received from the suprachiasmatic nucleus and maintain the cyclical, physiological and behavioral phenomenon inside an human, inside an organism like this. So there are different functions of biological clock. Once we know the characteristics of biological clock, we should know mainly two functions are there. The first function is the capacity of the biological clock to free run, that is operate without external cues. For example, as we were discussing that in biological endogenous rhythmic rhythms, if the clock is endogenous, then it can run the cyclical phenomenon without the external cues. Even if the environmental cues is absent, the biological clock can free run. Okay, so what is free run? Free run is basically the repetition of the biological rhythms after a fixed interval of time, even if there are no environmental cues. Okay, we'll try to understand in future further slides. Second function of the biological clock is the ability of timing signals, okay, known as Gatekeeper. These gatekeepers are the environmental cues. The gatekeeper is a German term which means time giver. Here, the uh, organism can receive the receive the signals from the environment. Its ability to receive the signal from the environment and then adapt itself, then make the body to perform the cyclical changes. To synchronize the cycles to the environmental signals. Like first function was to free run, like when there are no environmental cues, even then the cyclical changes are going on inside an organism. But if there are uh, new cues there, then new phenomenon is there, so that phenomenon should be received, and according to the that new changes, this biological clock can reset and biological clock can synchronize with the new changes. Okay, so what is gatekeeper? We should understand that. We know that biological rhythms are the cyclical changes, cyclical phenomena. Biological clocks are the internal ability, the internal structure that keeps time and makes an organism to perform biological rhythms. So then we have a third thing, that is gatekeeper, and this gatekeeper basically is the ability to receive the timing cues from the environment. Periodic environmental signals that entrains some biological rhythms. Entrains means it trains, it makes to perform the organism according to the environmental changes. Common gatekeeper include light, temperature, social cues such as clock, sound, even physical contact. These are the environmental cues. These are the cyclical environmental components which can be received by the organisms and makes the organism to act accordingly. A biological clock is said to be free running when these external cues are removed. That's what we were discussing, that the function of biological clock is to keep the time and free run. So even if the external cues are removed, these biological clocks can keep free running. Average free run period for the circadian rhythm is in human is 25 hours. What it means? It means that suppose we know that the circadian rhythm is about 24 hours. So like we have sleep and wake cycle which happens in almost 24 hours. So suppose we are kept in some individual or a group of individual or a particular individual is kept in dark and there is no environmental cue to make him aware about the day or night. Okay, so what will happen? This the cycle which was repeating in 24 hours, that will go to 25 hours, that will go up to 24 hours, 25 hours, then again it will repeat into 25 hours. So like earlier 2 days repetition was 24 plus 24 48, but now it is 25 plus 25 50. So every time this free runs, the cyclical phenomenon, the circadian rhythm free runs, its period gets increased. Okay, so the ability to keep the time by the biological clock is limited. That after a long duration, if there are no environmental cues, then the organism will lose the ability to keep the time. It will lose the ability to perform the cyclical changes, cyclical physiological or behavioral changes in its body. So this is free run. We have to understand here free run. What happens when there are no environmental cues? Then these rhythms, these cycles gets performed, but that the duration of cycle gets elongated. Earlier it was 24 hours, now it becomes 25 hours, then again 25 hours, and 25 hours will be added uh, into it, and ultimately the ability to perform the cyclical phenomenon will get dilute over the duration of long time. Okay, so next term is entrainment. We know the guide giver is the environmental cues. The ability to receive the environmental cues is there, is inbuilt in an organism. That's what the structure of a biological clock. So whenever we have the innate ability to receive the environmental cues, and environmental gives us a cues, for example the light. So whenever the light is there and the duration of that changes in light is there, then the biological system can be entrained. It can be entrained, it can be trained according to the changes in the environment. So for example, if a circadian rhythm was there which was in around 24 hours, so if that organism is forcefully in a manual environment, in a man-made environment, if the organism is forced to follow a 20 hours cycle or 15 hours cycle, then those organisms will be those organisms will follow new cyclic phenomenon, that is 15 hours of cycling. This is the process of entrainment. N organisms can be entrained for a new period of cyclical phenomenon. For example, in plants, what happens? There are day and night plants. There are long day plant and short day plants. So these plants receives the cues from the environment, the duration of light. So if in an artificial environment we give the exposure of light like 10 hours and then dark 14 hours, 10 plus 14, 10 plus 14, then those plants will be entrained towards this new cyclical change. In even if we go for the like 15 plus 11, sorry 15 plus 9, for example 15 hours light, 9 are dark, then those plants will get entrained for this new cyclical phenomenon 15 plus 9 hours of light and dark respectively. So there are limits to this time period that biological rhythms can be entrained. It is not like we can train uh, or in an organism for any period of light and dark duration. For circadian rhythm, in most animals, 18 hours is the shortest period tolerated with an upper limit of 28 to 30 hours. Okay, so it is basically total period of circadian rhythm. If we give an organism the cyclical light and dark phase 10 plus 8, then the organism will get entrained. But if we give these organism day and light and dark period like 5 plus 5, then that organism will not get entrained. Total period, the total duration must be more than 18 hours and less than 28 to 30 hours. Okay, if we give an organism the light and dark exposure like 20 plus 20, total 40 hours, 20 hour dark, 20 hour light, then even the organism will not get entrained. So entrainment is basically the making the organism to follow new cyclical phenomena, new environmental cues. So, as I was giving the example of shifting from one part of Earth to another part of Earth, like from India to USA, then there is a shift in the day and light total period of day and night. So those shifting is also a type of entrainment. Okay, the those are called phase shift. We will study in next slides. So the period can be changed. The duration, total duration of the period, for example light and dark, can be changed, and to adopt in according to the change in the period of time is called entrainment. Okay, so entrainment is we can give another example of entrainment is the entrainment in the acquisition of 24-hour wake sleep schedule by human infants after birth. A baby after birth uh, in gets entrained, or it acquires the day and night wake up and sleep cycle of its mother. But that newborn when becomes able to response the Zeitgeber from the environment like light and dark, the infants gradually adopts to the 24-hour schedule of the adult. Okay, then uh, we have other terms like oscillator. Oscillator is basically uh, internal structure. That's what we were studying about the biological clock. It is the internal structure that keeps the time and makes the organisms makes the uh, cyclical changes in the organisms. It is the repetitor. You can understand. It is the repetitor. It is the timekeeper. It sends this signal to the organism that you have to repeat this particular behavior, or you have to repeat this particular physiological function. So oscillator is just a uh, switch. Oscillator is just a switch. It switches on or switches off a switches on or switches off a particular physiological functions or behavioral functions inside an organisms. Then period, we know period is the length of time by which an organism repeats its cyclical responses. Okay, then phase is when the starting point and the end point. It is a particular point, reference point, means where the cycle should start. Like every day we go to sleep at 10 o'clock and then wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then during the day we keeps on waking, then at the night 10 we again go for the sleep. So the phase starts where at 10 o'clock at the night. Okay, 10 at night. So that is the phase. If suppose we shift this phase, we start sleeping at 8 p.m. in the night. Okay, so now 8 to suppose 4. Okay, so 8 to 4 there now the phase starts at 8 p.m. in the night, and we wake up at 4 in the morning, and we keeps on waking up and again sleep at the 8 in the 8 p.m. at the night. So basically the phase is the period where it starts. No, we can start period of sleep at 10 or at 8 or even at 12 p.m. at the night. Okay, so again the same thing, phase shift, as I was saying about the phase shift, when we almost 12 hours of difference is there in the day and night cycle of India and USA. So when someone goes from one time zone to another time zone, there are changes, there are difference of timing in like 1 hour or 2 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours. So that change in timing makes shift into the phase, the cyclical phase of the organisms. And according to the new cyclical change, and according to new phase, the organism can perform the cyclical phenomena, and this is called phase shift. Like I was giving the example of 8 p.m. in the night and 10 p.m. in the night. If someone goes every day go to sleep every day at 10 p.m. in the night, and now the phase is starting at 10 p.m. But after some time, if the organism, if a human is going to sleep at 8 p.m. in the night, then there will be a phase shift of 2 hours. Okay, so these are the basic concepts that we know. What are the terms like circadian rhythms, biological rhythm, and the biological clock, and what are the gatekeeper, what is entrainment, what is oscillation, then what are the phase shift. So these are the basic terms we should understand to understand the concept of biological clock. So in humans, the biological clock is kept by the suprachiasmatic nucleus, as I was showing you in one of the slides. Suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain, which is located at the above the optic chiasmic nucleus. So it is around the hypothalamus. Okay, so these are the structure, these are the uh, physical structure inside the human brain which keeps time and makes the organism to act according to the changes in the environment. So basically three components are there which makes a biological clock to function. The first one is the input point where we receive the light, for example, from the environment, which is basically the eye, the retina of eye, which is able to receive the photo period, which is able to receive the changes in the light and dark cycle of the environment. Then these changes, these cues from the environment goes to the travel to through the optic nerve to the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Okay, these suprachiasmatic nucleus are the center point basically uh, which basically studies the day and night cycle and keeps the time, means the last exposure from the light was how many hours before, like the morning started at 6 p.m. and the time is now, suppose 2 time the morning was started at 6 a.m. and the now time it is uh, 2 p.m. Then how much time has been passed? This time keeping, this ability to keep the time is in the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Then it has also the ability to send signals to the cells and the tissue of the organism through the neurotransmitters and other compounds into the different parts of the body. Like if For example, we can take the uh, thyroid gland. Okay, so thyroid gland basically is, it keeps the metabolic activity of the organism. So this metabolic activity is this metabolic activity keeps on repeating throughout the day. So this suprachiasmatic nucleus receives the signals from the environment through eye, and then releases some neurotransmitters to act on the thyroid. Then thyroid releases some hormones, and those uh, hormones act to develop the body function for, and make the organism ready for the change in the environment. For example, we can take the adrenal gland. So adrenal gland releases cortic hormones, which prepares animal for the fight or flight. So on the uh, site of some danger signals, this can be relayed through the suprachiasmatic nucleus towards the adrenal gland, and we can act. And there are different rhythmic outputs, n number of rhythmic outputs that we can uh, perform, that any organism can perform throughout the day, throughout the season, throughout the year, and that's what we call it cyclic phenomenon. So there are input structures, the structures where we can take input from the environment. Then there are pacemakers, which keeps the time, and keeps the time how much has been elapsed, and makes the environment aware of the time. And that awareness, that signal, then gets relayed to different parts of the body, different organ systems of the body, to perform the activity accordingly. So I hope I could explain this concept of biological clock, and you can further take this note from the Google Drive. I will share it, and you can further ask questions what you could not get. Basically, biological clock is the ability of an organism to keep the time according to the environment, so that it can synchronize its activities, its day-to-day activities. Like mating is seasonal phenomenon. Like feeding is day-to-day phenomenon throughout in the organisms. Okay, so uh, we should stop here, and thank you for your valuable time and patience to